Okay, so it's 2 o'clock. I'm not going to keep us waiting. So for those of you who have already joined, welcome. And yeah, today we will be looking at Revit Materials 101. And this forms part of our Level Up Your BIM Journey series, where we will be taking a deep dive into Revit Materials as a way to enhance your BIM model. Just want to fix something quickly. Great. Then just a quick introduction of myself for those of you who don't know me yet. I'm Anine Nota, and I'm a BIM specialist here at Baker Baines in the AEC build space. I'm also a qualified professional architect with 7 years of experience in practice. And then just a fun fact about me, clothes and plants are my weakness, and I'm also a personal stylist. Then just from an agenda point of view, we will start by looking at how do you typically use Revit Materials. Then we will look at Revit Materials in more detail, and that is now looking at your material browser, project materials and the AEC materials, the asset browser, and then also the various material settings and assets. And then lastly, we will look at how to apply all of these Revit material concepts when creating a new material. Then if you would like to watch some of our previous webinars or events, recordings of all of these are available on our YouTube channel. So go and have a look at our library if you want, and subscribe so that you can follow and keep track of all of our weekly webinars. Then just a quick overview of Baker Baines and who we are. So we've evolved over the past 5 years from being an Autodesk reseller to a consulting company set out to solve our customers' problems by using digital transformation, which helps them design and make a better world. So in doing so, we offer various business process improvement consulting, design and survey hardware consulting, design software consulting, as well as a blended learning approach, which is how we believe our customers can or should digest information. Then this is just an overview of our various product offerings. Something like our scan to BIM services using the TopCon and Leica technologies are also becoming increasingly popular. Then before we start with the presentation, I would just like to run a quick poll to get some feedback from you guys. So I'm just quickly going to launch it. Okay, so I can see that it's on the screen, and then so the question is, to what extent do you use Revit Materials? Okay, there's currently a 50-50 between I'm a beginner in Revit and new to materials, and then so actually the second one is starting to be higher. Very basic, I only use those in the Revit library. Okay, so that is great to hear. It means that you're really going to find value from today's session. So just going to close that again. All right, so let's start by looking at some basics of Revit materials and also how you use them. Now in Revit, a material is more than something that you can touch or hold in your hand. So you can think of it rather as an information container, which helps you keep track of things like identity settings, your graphic settings, appearance assets, physical assets, as well as thermal assets. In other words, it's the 5 tabs that you typically see when you're inside of your material browser. Then there are 3 primary ways in which a Revit material are used or applied in a model. First of all, by category, or by element, and then by face. So we will be discussing each of these in detail just now, but just notice the appearance of the 3 walls. So the first has a brick pattern that is assigned by category. So this then means that all walls will share or have this material. Then the second one has a tile finish that is assigned by the element, meaning that this material will be assigned or applied to all walls of the same wall type. And then the last one has a solid darker color that is painted on a single face, which overrides the material that is assigned to the wall type. All right, so first of all, by category. Now, when you have a 3D element that does not have a specific material applied to it, the project-wide object style is used. So you will see that you typically find the object styles from your Manage tab, clicking on Object Styles. Then, when a 3D element has its material parameters set to by category, this is when the object style material is used. So just to show you guys an example, for instance, plumbing fixtures, if the material is set by category and also a material assigned, here, for instance, porcelain, it means that all of your plumbing fixtures will have this material assigned to it. Then lastly, assigning a material directly to a 3D element overrides the object style that has been set here. So just to show you, if you have a look at the type properties of an element, like this toilet, we can see there's a ceramic material assigned for it. So that will then, in other words, override the material that was set in the object styles. And this snip is just an example showing the difference between the two. Then the most common way of applying materials is by element, and this is true for both of your system families and loadable families. Now, your system families are typically things like your walls, ceiling, floors, and roofs, and they can't exist outside of your project. So therefore, the material adjustment option for them is built into the Edit Assembly dialog box, which you get if you click on Edit next to Structure. This is what you will see, and then this is where you can change the material. Then for your loadable families, which are things like your furniture, casework, specialty equipment, doors, etc., they are developed in the family editor environment. And so this is, for instance, this example is inside of the family, and each 3D element then has a material parameter set for it. Now, when the element is first created, the material parameter is set to by category. So that is what we can see on the image in properties on the left. And you can then change it in one of two ways. Either still inside of the family, you can pick a material in the family itself, or when you're back in your project, if there's a material parameter assigned, you can change the material from there. Then also note that the material parameter of a family can either be set as a type or an instance parameter. So the difference for them is if it's set to a type parameter, the material then is changed in the type properties of the element, applying the material to all elements of this type. Whereas if it's set as an instance parameter, your material will, you will be able to change it from your properties palette, and this will only apply it to the selected elements material. In other words, it won't override all of that specific families of the same type. Then a third way in which a material is typically assigned or applied is by using your paint tool. And this applies a material to a single face. So you get your paint tool from your Modify tab, clicking on the paint icon, and you simply then apply it to your surface. And your paint tool you can use on system families such as your walls, ceilings, floors, etc. So I'm just going to show you a quick demo of how to use the paint tool. So you will go to your Modify tab, click on the paint icon. So there's two options. The first one you click, and then from your material browser, you will then select the material that you want to apply. And then you will simply click the face of the wall or the surface that you want to apply to. Just note that using the paint tool does not override all the sides, so you will need to rotate your view in order to apply it to the other sides of that element as well. If you want to remove it, you can also do that by simply clicking on the painted sides and then removing it. Then just note that when a surface is painted, Revit will paint the entire face and not just the portion visible in the current view. So, for instance, on this image, let's say the back wall is that is numbered 1 is a common wall to a corridor inside of an office. And if you apply the paint tool to the internal face of the wall, the entire side of this corridor wall will be painted and not just the portion visible in the room that you're in. So there is actually an option for a workaround, and that is by using your split face tool. So this is Revit's way to constrain the area or the extent of a material that is to be painted on a face. So you can find the split face tool also in your modify tab in the geometry panel in your ribbon, and it sits just above your paint tool. So if you use this tool, it thus allows you to easily split the face of a wall and then apply a different material to that split surface instead of having to draw a separate layer or a wall for in order to apply material to that. So we can see that in the bottom image. Okay, so once again, just a quick demo of how to use the split face tool. So here I've got a restroom wall which has tiles, and say for instance you wanted to apply a tile band on a portion of the wall, more or less in the area where my cursor is currently. Then, maybe you also want to use that for a skirting as well. Then you will go to modify once again, and then above your paint tool, it's the split face tool. You will select that, and then you will click the surface that you want to split. So you will see it will activate a orange boundary wall, or rather boundary, and then you will start adding your separation lines. So you won't draw an entire boundary, just the separation lines. So once that is finished, I can see that it shows me a blue frame, and that surface is now separate. So then I can go and use my paint tool, select the type of tile that I want to use, and just paint it. And then you can just go and align it with the other tiles. So very easy, without having to add a separate layer, you can split the surface. Here I'm doing a skirting as well. Same steps back to the paint tool, and also then just align it properly. Great, so if you wanted to delete the split surface, you can simply select the area and just delete it. Okay, so that is the split face tool. Then we're going to look at Revit Materials in more detail. So if you want to explore your materials in your project, we have seen it already, but you will open your material browser from the Manage tab, clicking on the Materials icon. Then from your material browser, you've got various options and things that you can do. So first of all, if you click that drop down, it allows you to change how you view your materials. So here you can say, okay, listen, you want to show all, show in use, show unused, view it by type, sort it by name or the material color. Also, you can set the thumbnail size as well. Then the top part of this window is all of the materials in the project. So those are the materials that's loaded and available to use. Then clicking on those arrows, it allows you to toggle on and off the external material library, which is the bottom one. So if you click it, it will expand or minimize. And then the bottom part is you can see I've got it expanded. It's under the ASC materials, and those are the materials in your library. They don't sit in your project yet. And this icon then, if you click it, you can either expand or minimize the selected materials properties. Then you also have an option to filter your materials by class, so that so maybe you just want to see all of your ceramic materials, so you can click that and it will filter it by class. Then also, if you right-click a material, you've got various options like edit, duplicate, rename, delete, and you can even add it to a favorites list. Then we will, so we've looked at the browser side of things. Now we will look at the information contained in each material, which is sorted in the tabs of the material browser. So we're going to start with the identity tab. First of all, the descriptive information is where you can elaborate on a material to help the design team understand what the material is used for. You can also specify the class, and this determines where or under which class the materials in the project material list is sorted. Then your product information, rather, it tells you information like who makes the material, for how much, and where can you find more information online by adding a URL link. Also, model, for instance, that is the model number or the code assigned by the materials manufacturer. Then your Revit annotation information is keynotes and marks. Now, a keynote you typically use to tag elements or materials with standard CSI keynotes or custom keynotes that you create yourself. I will get back and explain keynotes later again. Then mark, for example, if you want to give a descriptive number or an ID to a material, it works on the same principle as a window or a door tag. You can add a mark number here, and that then gets picked up in the tag when you tag a material. Then your graphic settings, which is the next tab. This is typically, this settings determines the appearance of elements on the screen and also how they print. So first of all, if you assign a color here, this is typically the color you will see on a surface when your visual style is set to either shaded or consistent colors. So just note that this is not used for photorealistic renderings. So your photorealistic renderings, the appearance of those materials is typically defined by the appearance asset, which is the next tab. So if you tick the use render appearance box, what it means is it will take the settings that you've set in the appearance asset and it will apply it to the surface of elements in your view. So that's then what you, in other words, will see on inside of your views. Then if you tweak the transparency, it makes elements more see-through or not, and you can typically use this on materials like glass, etc. Then your surface pattern, this will display anytime that an object surface is visible in a view, and then your cut pattern will display within the boundary of an object when it's being cut in a view. So this is just two images to just show you the difference between the two and what it looks like. So number 3 is your surface pattern, and then number 4 is your cut pattern, which you see when you cut through an element. Then you can also choose to assign a background pattern or a full color. For instance, on a surface pattern, if you assign a background full, this is more or less what you will see in your view on the surface pattern. Then when you click on a pattern, either in the surface pattern or a cut pattern, you've got various types of patterns. So it will open up your full patterns dialog, and you've got 2 types of patterns. You've got a drafting pattern and then a model pattern. Now your model pattern typically represents actual materials. such as ceiling tiles, concrete blocks, bricks, floor tiles, etc. Whereas your drafting patterns symbolically represent the material. And also note that the density of your pattern will update according to scale. So if your scale changes, the density will change as well, whereas your model patterns will stay the same, irrespective if there's a change in your scale. Then next is your appearance tab. Now the settings in this tab is only where it only really comes into play in one of two ways. Either when the visual style is set to realistic or ray trace, and also then when you're doing an actual rendering. Otherwise, the way that an element appears in Revit is controlled by the graphic settings tab. Then also different types of appearance assets have unique options. For instance, if we look at this paint material on the right, the asset type indicates wall paint. So this is first looking at the application method. So you can choose different application methods such as roller, brush, or spray. Also, very important that when you create new materials, it's important to also use the correct asset type. So, for instance, if we look on the image to the right, that asset type is set to wall paint, whereas the image on the left for the ceiling, the asset type displays as generic. Now, where the difference between the two comes in and selecting the correct asset type is if Revit knows the actual material, your render quality will be higher for that material. Whereas if you make use of generic materials, you will have a lower render quality. Therefore, remember to rather assign a correct asset type and limit the use of generic materials. Then also your AEC materials, that's at the bottom list. The asset types indicates parameters, and also try and use these materials wherever you can or as far as possible as they create or produce higher quality renderings. Then just a quick demo of how you set the correct asset type, and you do that by assigning the materials from your asset browser. So I'm going to show you by using a 600 by 600 ceiling tile. Note here that the appearance asset is on generic, and also, okay, so I've opened my asset browser, going to ceiling. You will select the image or the texture or the type that you want to use, and you will double click it. So this will bring it into your asset of this material, and we can see that it changed to parameters where it was generic before that. Then also with many materials, you can use a raster image of a texture or a finish to fill or cover a surface for a rendering. So this can be either an actual photo or a simulation. Now, very important if you use raster images is that that image should be tileable. So what this means is if it needs to be repeated to cover a large surface, the edges of the image you don't want to be apparent. Now to explain this, I'm going to compare two grass materials. So the first one is this side grass, and if you click on the image, it will open your texture editor. Now note at the bottom here under repeat, it's set to tile. But if we look at the preview, we can see that this texture has quite a color variance to it, especially at the edges. So what this means is if I'm going to tile it over a large surface, it's not going to work that well. This is to give you an idea of what it will look like because of that color variance on the edges. So the other way is with the second example, once again, if I click the image, we can see that this image is more seamless and it has little to no color variance or contrast also on the edges. So the image and the texture is more seamless. So if I then use this one and create a tiled pattern, we can see that the entire texture is more seamless. So you don't see that edges. And this is more ideal. This is what you want to use. So always remember that when you are using a texture or an image, remember to use a texture that is seamless in order to be tileable. Then also important when you're using raster images is to pay attention to the scale and also the dimensions of the image. So once again, I'm just opening the texture editor, and if we look at the preview, we can see that the image size is, it shows a 400 by 400 millimeter measurement, and there's four tiles that sits inside of that 400 millimeter measurement. So that, in other words, means that each individual tile is then going to be 100 by 100 millimeter, and that is also the size that it will be on your rendering. So for instance, if you are installing 200 by 200 tiles, it means that the scale of your sample will need to be 800 by 800 to correctly reflect that. This is just an image showing or a 3D image showing when the tile pattern has been applied and the visual style has been set to realistic. So I will later on show you an alternative method of creating a tile material using a synthetic pattern as opposed to using an image for the pattern. Then the next tab is the physical asset, and this is primarily used by the structural engineers to manage the structural properties of concrete, steel, aluminium, and wood. And then also this information can be used in structural analysis programs. Now, if you've got a material selected that doesn't show or has no physical asset for it yet, like we can see on this image on the right, you can simply click on the plus icon and then click on physical. So this will then open up your asset browser, and then under the section of Autodesk physical assets, you will navigate to the correct class of material, in this case metal, and you will then double click on the texture or the material or asset that you want to add. So that arrow, if you click that, it will bring it into this materials asset. Also note that if the physical information is not applicable to your material, you can delete this asset from the material by clicking on the cross. Then the last tab is your thermal asset, and this is this aspect of the material is typically used for energy modeling calculations. Also, the basics are computed directly within Revit, such as the R values or the thermal mass of a wall or floor. If you want more advanced calculations, it can be derived from external applications. Then just on a side note, you can also delete the thermal asset, but if you do that, what it will do, it will cause the calculation values that are in the materials edit assembly to be blank. So just to show you what it looks like, if I'm in the edit assembly of a material, here we can see that the calculation values still shows, and if I delete it, it will change to 0. Then very important when you duplicate materials is to know how to do it properly in order for you to not unintentionally override another material. So in other words, when you duplicate a material, the appearance asset with this will be associated to both the original material and also the material, the copy of it. So here we can see in the image on the right, there's a duplicate, and also if you have a look just below identity, it shows a number 1, which means that they now share an appearance asset. So very important is to duplicate the appearance asset as well. So this is I'm just going to show you a quick demo of how do you duplicate materials and the assets. So I'm going to duplicate this blue ceramic tile by right-clicking and selecting duplicate. But before I do that, just note under appearance, there's a number 0, which means they don't share an appearance asset yet. So when I duplicate this material, just note the number changes to 1, meaning that they now share the same appearance asset. Once I've duplicated the material, I can go and rename it. But note now, if I go and change the type of tile, I make it a darker color, because I haven't duplicated the appearance asset, it will override my original material as well. And that's not ideal. So the right way of doing it will be to duplicate the appearance asset, and then see it now, it says 0, so it means they don't share an appearance asset. And if I go and change the type or the color of the tile now, we will see that the original one is not changed, and we can now use it inside of our model. So just going back to my material browser, I can see that the color in the project materials has been updated, and also remember, always when duplicating is to update the name as well. Then looking at how to add or replace assets. Now, all of the assets, except for graphics and identity, which are actually not assets, they are settings, can be replaced with another option from the asset browser library. So if you've got an existing asset, like we have here with the dark blue tile, and we want to replace it, you can simply click on the replace asset icon, go to your appearance library, and then go and choose the material or the texture that you want to replace it with. So I double click on that texture or on the arrows, and that will bring it into this materials asset. So I can see it's now updated. Now just note that if you make adjustments to an asset, it will affect all of the materials that make use of it. So if you want to rather create a different version, you will need to duplicate the appearance asset as well. So you've got two options of duplicating. Then creating new materials. Now, if the material that you want to use is not available in your project, that is now in the top project material list, you can either create a new material, or you can load it from your asset browser or your AEC materials library. Now, also just a tip is that if the material that you want to use exists inside of the asset browser library, it's much faster to use that material as opposed to creating your own material from scratch, as it already has the existing assets. So just to show you, your search bar at the top it allows you to search for materials inside of your project material list, as well as your external library. I can see here that my project materials does not have a mosaic tile yet, so I'm going to create a new one. And then you will just give it a new name. Then just notice the appearance asset is still on generic, and there's also no image for it. I'm going to apply one from my asset browser. Once again, under the appearance library, I'm selecting a mosaic, and I can also see that it has changed to ceramic. And also what you can do is, the other option is, if you want to add a material from your AEC materials, you can simply double click it and it brings it into your project material list. Then this brings us to our last section, where we will be looking at how do we apply all of the concepts that we just discussed on materials when creating a new material. So in this example, I'm going to create a new ceramic tile using an existing material and then change it accordingly. So you will open up your material browser, and I'm first of all going to filter my list to only show all of my existing ceramic materials. Then I'm going to duplicate this existing blue ceramic tile, and I'm going to rename it. Then starting with my identity settings, first of all, my name has been updated when I renamed it. And then things like comments, I said shower wall tile, so that just shows the application. Then model is your sample or your product number, and then URLs where you can go online and get more information of the specific manufacturer. And then Keynote, I just want to pause on Keynote quickly. So for those of you who don't know what it is, as I've mentioned, it's a type of tag, and you use it to tag either an element or a material using a reference number. So instead of you typing out an entire note or a description, it's a quicker version by simply using a tag. So what Revit does is, I'm just going to continue the video. You will see that there are 3 dots. So if you click on that, it will take you into Revit's existing Keynote file. And also you will see that the various building elements and also materials are divided into divisions. So for tiles, for instance, I will go to finishes, and then I will select the tiling Keynote. Then mark is when you add a tag, that is what you will see in your tag. Then graphics, use render appearance. I'm going to keep that unticked as I rather want to use a surface pattern. So a color, I've already preset a color that I want to display in my views. Surface pattern, I'm going to use a 200 by 200 tile grid pattern. And then for my background and cut pattern, I'm going to set it to none. As a tile is very thin, so you won't really see that pattern when you cut through it on a section or so. Then just note back to identity. If it's set to ceramic in the class here, it only influences the way or the class under which it's sorted in the project material list, and not necessarily affect the appearance asset like I've just shown you. So if we go to the appearance tab, then very important is to duplicate that asset. So you can see the number changed to 0, and also then just rename the style. Also just update the description. And then we can see, so the original material used a raster image for the appearance of the material. But I'm going to show you creating a synthetic pattern instead. So from this drop down, you will select tiles, and this will then open your texture editor. So here you can set various settings. So first of all, you can change the type of pattern. I'm keeping it on stack bond, and the tile count I'm going to make 2, and I'm just jumping to the scale. Remember, I'm using a 200 by 200, so that means my overall dimensions should be 400 by 400. So in my preview, we can see that because I've set my tile count to be 2, it means a 2 times 200 by 200. Then the color, once again, you set the color of the tile. You can set the color of your ground as well. Then you also have options to play around with, like your color variance, as well as fade variance. So I've got a very slight fade variance, but if you start changing that, you can either have fade variance or not. So if you change your randomized settings, you can see that it changes the position of that fade. So I'm setting that a bit higher again, so we can see it changes how it appears. Okay, so I'm just going to set that to 0, as I don't want any fade variance on my tile. Then also your gap width you can set your stacking layout. Then I just want to pause on transforms now. If you tick the link texture transforms, what that means is it helps that all the it helps that all the changes that you made to the position, the scale, and also to your repeat settings of this attribute are distributed to all the other attributes within the material that use this texture. Okay, and then so I've ticked that, and just scrolling down, scale I'm just going to correct to 400 by 400. For some reason it keeps popping up that 0.05, so just fixing that and then done. And then you also have other finish options like gloss, satin or matte that you can set. And then also you have a relief pattern. Now, if you switch on a relief pattern, what that does, it gives your material more realistic look. So it gives it that embossed appearance. So I'm going to also just update it from a raster image to also be a tile pattern. And then once again, this needs to correspond to your actual to the pattern that you've assigned in the top material. So just updating the sample or the scale. So now we can see it displays at the correct scale. And also you've got other options. So for instance, you want to create a checker pattern using different colors. You can also use that. So all of these settings you will typically use if you don't have a proper image that you can use to represent your material. Then also if you go back to graphics, to alignment, this texture alignment, this is where you can make sure that the render appearance pattern relates to the surface pattern so that they align properly. Right, so once this has been done, this is now your basic setup of or creation of a tile material, and you are ready to use that inside of your model. And you will use the same process and concepts if you want to create other types of materials as well. And this brings us to the end of our session for today. And I will now like to allow for some questions if there are any. I'm just quickly going to see. And just to give you guys a minute or so if you want to ask any questions. I hope that you found value from today's session, and this will help you or look at materials from a new view. Yes, I see. Tiens, can you perhaps maybe just type your question in the chat box? Okay, parameters. So I just want to see. Can you talk about global parameters? Loved it, thanks. Can you talk about global parameters? Do you mean material parameters? Just want to see. Maybe, Tiens, if you can just elaborate on that question. Yes, material parameters. Okay, so material parameters are things that you set up in the family itself. So like I've shown you in one of my previous slides, is when you create a family, you typically or create a material parameter for that. So what that does, when you load that family back into your project, it allows you to change the material inside of your inside of the project. Whereas if you haven't created material parameters, you won't be able to change the materials of the family inside of your project. So the way that it was created in the family editor, that is how it will show, and the materials that will be applied in your project as well. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. So if any of you guys have more questions, you're welcome to email me. Also go or send me a message on LinkedIn and I'll get back to you. Then just some takeaways from today's session. Remember, when you duplicate a material, you need to duplicate the appearance asset as well. Then also, like I said, if you don't have a proper image of a pattern that you want to use, for example, for a tile, you can create your own synthetic pattern. Then also your AEC materials, which is your bottom external material library, they produce better quality renderings. So try and use them as far as possible. Also remember your split surface tool, which you use to divide the face of a wall, ceiling, a roof, or a floor, which helps you to apply a different material as opposed to adding an additional layer and assigning a material to that. Then also a relief pattern gives your material a more realistic appearance. Then just in closing, how can Baker Baines help you with your BIM journey? If you want to learn more about Revit, you can book one of our standard training courses or our refresher training and we will show you the way. Then if you are more interested in customized or specialized training, we've got various specialist series as well as accelerator courses which you can book to upskill. And then lastly, if you need help with any of your BIM standards in your office and also on projects, you can talk to us about your BIM journey as well as your BIM execution plan. Then just lastly on our unique consulting methodology called the iAdopt. So what is it? It's our consulting that we use to help clients develop and implement a digital strategy and also to transform digitally. We also use this to help you optimize your business processes and workflows, also adopt your technology, all with the goal of designing and making a better world. Then the benefits of our iAdopt is it's really focused on solving problems, delivering tangible outcomes, and it stretches well beyond the CAD environment. In other words, it's more a holistic approach and also includes a change management. Then if you want to go and follow us online, we've got various, we are on all the various social media platforms as well as LinkedIn. And just remember, if you need any support, our Baker Baines support desk are open weekdays from 8 o'clock to 11:30 in the evenings, and our details are on the screen. And then, yeah, so this brings us to the end, and I would like to thank everyone for joining me today, and I hope you found value from this session and go and have a lovely weekend. Goodbye, everyone.